Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today at our roundtable discussion as the conclusion of our Archives in Focus series for 2022. I'm here, Christina Crowder, joined by Eleanor Brzezinski. To my Zoom right and to my Zoom left is Ilya Schneeves. And oh, are you gonna? Okay, and Mila Shalchova is not going to make it to be with us today. She is under the weather and not really able to sort of talk in a Zoom capacity. But what we're gonna talk about here today is we're going to spend a little bit of time in the spotlight here, the three of us in our view, but I want to make sure that we actually, since we are such a nice and small group here, spend some time in gallery view having an open discussion about our topic today. And one of the ways I'd like to sort of start focusing our conversation is to talk about the way that archives and archivists, the people who create these resources and the people who work with these resources, help us as artists and as scholars to create new works of arts and to reinterpret things from the past in new and creative ways. And so to kick off our conversation, I want to sort of highlight a story that I know about Eleanor and with Eleanor. And you can unmute yourself. But we were on the phone the other day and we were talking about this song that I associate with Eleanor. And I don't even know the title, but it's about the concept of taking but not stealing. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that song, Eleanor?
Sure. Um, Ich hab nicht kein Schande is the title. It's actually the first line of the song. Maybe there are other titles. I don't know. Ich hab nicht kein Schande, ich hab nicht kein Busche. And yeah, there are alternate first lines for this song actually. But anyway, Busche rhymes with Yerushe, which is heritage, because the song says, "I have no shame. I received the profession as a heritage that I should not steal, but I can take." And it's a poverty song. It's a thief song. So it goes through the whole family tree saying, "Sure, my mom, she liked to go on markets but she was not stealing, she was just taking. And my sister with her long arms, oh no, God forbid, she was not stealing, she was just taking. And my dad, he loved horses that did not belong to him, but of course, he was not stealing, he was just taking. So I want to leave a will so that my children in 100 years know that they can't steal, but they can take." And for me, so I named my project, I learned this song from Lawrence Klamberg in 2014 when he did um, a repertoire class on the Ruth Rubin collection at EVO. It was part of the winter program. And um, and so after I attended this class, I was like, oh my God, I want to like dive into this collection. And I put together a group of musicians in Paris where I was living then. And I named this project Yerushe as a wink to this song. Um, and um, and for me, it's a metaphor of what we do as folk musicians, um, because all of this is our heritage. It belongs to us by default, and um, um, it's handed down somehow. And I'm not talking about ethnicity here. I'm talking about cultural um, cultural transmission, which is a fluid thing to me. I'm not talking about identity. I'm talking about how things get transmitted. So um, and of course it forges identities, but it's not the other way around to me. Anyway, so yeah, and this also like resonated for me a lot with something I heard Adrian Cooper of blessed memory said in the Wexler oral history interview that she gave for the Yiddish Book Center. I mean, for the Wexler Oral History. project, and where she was, I think the question was, what is your advice to next generation? And she was like, just be bold, take this and do what you want with it. And it takes courage. Um, that I and that really like resonated with me, and I think it's the same idea in a way that's in this song, um, or the way I interpret this song.
Cool, cool. Ilya, do you want to you can stay unmuted. You can certainly contribute to this conversation. I don't know if you have in mind, I have not asked you to prepare for this in any way. This is a brand new question coming to Ilya for the first time, but like I see you as this incredibly inventive and creative musician and a performer. And you are very actively involved, I think, in the transformation of historical sources into new works. And I'm going to just sort of pose an open ended question, a couple of them. And one of them is like maybe if you have thoughts about your work with the Emilius Melangaila's collection, if yeah, thank you. Kind of got it right. Like how you see that moving forward, or if that's not a good question for you, like if you can think of an archival source that you yourself felt deeply connected to as a transformative, as an example of the way that you really engaged with an archival source in a um, transformative way in some way.
Thank you.
Either or
Yeah.
both. Yeah.
Um, there are no wrong questions.
Totally.
They're all, but I might not have the answers for all of them. There is okay. So the second question is if there's an archival source that I feel connected to, and I guess there is a few. I mean, I'm not really yet a scholar. I'm a kind of a wannabe part-time scholar when I'm not playing music, and so I'm, occasionally I stumble upon certain things and then I spend a few days doing just that, and then I forget about it for a few months. And for example, the Berezovsky collection, which I kind of rediscover every few months, mostly because I need to find a tune from there or something, and then I end up playing through a bunch of tunes, and oh yeah, this is this. I was looking for something else, and then I found 3 or 4 tunes that I haven't noticed before. There's a few more overlaps with the KMDMP repertoire that I don't remember which ones I shared and which ones I didn't share. Now, I have a list somewhere separate to my other list of Berezovsky tunes. So, and it was interesting because working with this with the Latvian collection, and I can elaborate more on this later, but it's interesting because I was working directly with the archival materials, and or with copies of archival materials. They were not, they were unedited. They were pretty raw material that was almost like firsthand, secondhand, directly from the source. And so yeah, and I've been doing this for 10 years, I think, now, kind of on and off. So I definitely feel attached to that in some ways, and feel I feel like I know a lot about this particular collection, and I feel like it influenced my just my approach. I have more respect for people who have the patience to sit in archives and work and discover. I have less respect for people transcribing things incorrectly, or
We are all here for that, Ilya. We are thank you for saying it out loud.
Attaching their own preconceptions into their transcriptions. Although, and I'm also became more aware that I am sometimes guilty of that myself, or not guilty. How do we transcribe music, and why do we transcribe music? And broadly, like in more practical terms for me, like when I make a let's say, a chart for something, for a workshop or for a concert, what do I choose to put in it? Why do I choose to put it in? And how will this be perceived by people who see this chart? And how will this be perceived by people in 100 years who for some reason discover my chart in their archives and be like, oh, so this is what the music sounds like. You're solidifying something, you're putting something in writing that was not originally meant to be put in writing. So
Except that we know that, well, okay, yes, yes. But except that we know that writing down of music was very much part of the Klezmer educational process in at least the late 19th century. I think we can reasonably assert that that's true because we know it from the Paev, at least.
Right.
So that at least in some places, that sometimes the written down music was part of the education of a klezmer. It was not the only education of a klezmer, but it was part of the education.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the fact that it's not the only it's important that it's not the only
Correct.
it cannot be the only source, because there's some things that's very hard to convey, and or you can try as best you can, but yeah, I'm not sure if this is
No,
answering your
that's
question,
really,
but definitely was transformative. And also maybe later I can share if I find some files, because since we last time spoke, when was that, 2 months ago? I mentioned that I was going to rehearse and perform the material from the collection, and we don't have a professional video of it yet, but maybe I can find some phone
unprofessional
videos
video.
and share from the concert that we did. I think it went very well.
That's
Very interesting
great.
experience.
When you're talking about Berezovsky, I want to sort of bring this back to Eleanor and probably to some of our other friends in the room. Like I love Berezovsky as a musician because there's something there for everyone. Like when I go through that book, like my favorite tunes are not necessarily the favorite tunes that there are other people's favorite tunes, and like you may encounter it in different times in different ways, and like what you're describing, you go back into it and you find new tunes that you hadn't really spent time with or spent time on until you see that they're connected somewhere else. And I know with Eleanor, like I associate that tune that we were talking about like with you, because of all of the tunes that are in the Ruth Rubin archive, or of all the tunes that you've heard or learned in a workshop, like this one it seems to me very much in the center of your repertoire. And so these big collections, we sometimes look at them and they're like, it's so much, it's so many. How can I, why do we need to have so many exemplars? What's it for? How can any one person sort of grasp it? All of these things. And because like when we experienced this with Kisselhoff project in the very beginning, had all these pages, all these Heften, where do I start? And we didn't have an answer for that question. We just said, start wherever you are, just dive in. And it's very disorienting to dive into a huge collection like that. But from that process, like we have Hanna's Skoczna, international klezmer hit. We have this tune, Eleanor, that, this song of yours, that has really become a feature of that you will be transmitting in the future, and we all have our favorite tunes from Kisselhoff here, and you have, and I'm sure you have also, Ilya, but you have your favorite tunes from Berezovsky. We have our favorite tunes from German Goldenstein, and stuff like that. But I think your relationship with this tune changed over time, Eleanor, and that was another thing I wanted to. You said you told the story about the different tune, but we were talking about how your relationship with the song changed over time as you became an older person. And I thought that was really interesting to highlight too.
Right. I think I was talking to you about another song when I said that was because you said, your Yiches song, and I thought, and this other song has Yiches in it. It's a love song also from the Ruth Rubin collection that I heard for the first time, I don't know, in the mid 2000 at Bailey Scherter Gottesman's house. She was having a zingerei, and I think Itzik sang that. Itzik Gottesman, Bailey's daughter, was a great folklorist, and I found it really funny because it's this song that says, I'm not pretty, I don't have any money. Sorry, son. Okay. Uh, language. So, um, not very pretty. I don't have any money. I'm not from a good family. I don't have yiches. And I'm not very smart. So if you want one that has all of this, go away. But if you love me, come. And I think, retrospectively, I think it's a dialogue, but I've always understood it as told from the woman's perspective. And then she ends it ends with, "If you love me, come because I can't wait anymore. I can't hold myself," which I found very very cool to express that kind of feminine urge to. But uh, so anyway, I went to Itzik. I asked him where does this come from. He told me it's from Ruth Rubin. So I went into the Yivo Sound archive and asked Lauren. So that was many years before I started working. Then I asked Lauren where can I find this, and he showed me the album of love songs, and I learned this song, and so I started singing it with my first band in Paris, the Shtetl Stompers, and I actually recorded recorded it then twice with two different other bands than this one. So I've and I mean, as I evolved as a person, the meaning that each of these verses meant, you know, uh, evolved a little bit, and and so you relate to the song differently. And I also felt um, when I started singing that I didn't want to sing sad songs. I just, it was just, I felt like I'm too young for that. Now I'm okay singing sadder songs. Anyway, things like that.
You earned the right to sing sad songs as you started to
I
express
don't
those
know.
things in your life. You know that
It's
made
just,
it more meaningful that way. You know,
I don't know that. I guess it's a personality thing, but
totally, totally. I'm called to mind. Um, Yeah, I don't know. Elia, do you have an example of a tune or a melody that kind of came from an archival source that you have changed that you have a changed perception of, like from when you first learned it and to the present? I'm just sort of like asking
You
a
mean
question.
that my perception have changed? That
Yeah, like that. Yeah, or that your relationship to it has sort of changed over time. It's kind of a funky question. I have an example that I'm
I
stalling for
mean,
time.
all of them, or most of them.
All of them.
Um,
Do you want to talk about one of them?
but maybe you give your example. I think
Well, I
about
have to
one.
find something, so I'm going to have you guys riff for just a second. I don't know if anybody in the room actually has, put your hand up if you have
I mean,
a source that has that quality to it. And go ahead, Eleanor, by all
yeah,
means.
I mean, again, I don't want to embarrass you, Ilya, but I just want to say that you say you're not a scholar yet. I don't know what that means, being a scholar or not being a scholar, but like just Ilya has this. He's his own archive because it's really incredible to play with Ilya because he knows what everyone knows. So even if you don't have a set list, he's gonna come up with the tune he knows you like to play, and that's amazing. So like all these oh, and I wanted to say it's related to something else, like all these human connections that are emotional and that connects the songs to people, that what you were saying earlier. For me, they're still very important also in the way I learn those tunes and in the way I approach the archives, because in fact most of the tunes that I know from archives I still learned from someone. Like a few of them I read through and I picked them, but most of them I still have a human connection of someone teaching me the song or the tune, um, or playing it with someone, and that's the connection. So it's not for, I mean, yeah, maybe it's partly me either not having a lot of time to read through the stuff or being lazy. I don't know, but anyway, but it's like I also love um, receiving that. I mean, it's like it's a transmission that's still happening with this material. People discovering it, sharing it, someone else receives it. It circulates that way.
Well, and it also gives us the way to create our memory palace. Like part of the way that I remember old time tunes is by remembering who I was playing with in a particular session. And if somebody plays a tune that I learned in a particular, I'm like, oh, I learned that tune in that session that year at Clifftop. Like it's going to jog the memory of other tunes that I associate with that particular playing session, and the repertoire of the people that I was playing with at that particular moment. If it happens to be something that's stuck,
Right.
So we're building we're always in this this way of building a memory palace of our own personal repertoire, and we are aided by having things written down. But like Ilya, I think you have a very vast memory palace of all of these tunes somehow. Is that when I say
It's
that?
yeah, I mean it's not always very organized, and sometimes I can't access certain parts of it when I need. But I think what Eleanor mentioned, it's come basically, I mean, I sort of always had that feeling, but I'm realizing more than the practical side of playing music for me, or like the fun side of playing music is playing with other people. And so I find that the easiest way, it again depends on who we're playing with and what is our shared repertoire, but it's the easiest way is to at least have that some connection of here's something that I know this person knows, and so we can play it right now, rather than
Right.
discuss for a half hour what we're going to play and then maybe play or maybe not. And yeah, because I don't know, I mean, I think all musicians are like that we enjoy this musical connection, or maybe not all musicians, I don't know. Sometimes I like to play by myself and just play the tunes that I know. But yeah, no, I think it's very important. I think there was and I don't remember where I had this conversation. I think it was sometime last year or this year in Weimar, maybe with Craig, about how people used to have like their nigun, their own tune that they either wrote or they kind of, that was just the tune that they did. And I think it was in relation to certain Hasidim or somebody who would like sing this nigun over and over, and then it becomes this is Reb Ilya's nigun, and so, and I'm sure I have some tunes that I tend to play that I like to play, and then I get bored, then I play something totally different, but then in the end I still come back to those tunes. So
Totally. That totally makes sense. I want to bring into this uh, uh, um, an exemplar, and then I want to go back into gallery view and open this up for a little bit more discussion about our relationship to archival sources and places. But like the one that I'd like to call to mind is Mac 1 1785, and this is a tune that is also found in the Berezovsky collection, and it goes. I'm going to put the text from Makanevsky into the chat. But this is the tune that goes it has a really funny quirky B part, and then the C part, there's a little short little coda C part. And I remember coming across that in the Berezovsky collection and being like, wow, this tune is really amazing, and then I couldn't figure out how to play it, and so I tried a bunch of different ways of playing it, and I played it in kind of a peppy 2, because it says in Berezovsky he lists it as a Gassennigen, right? And so I was trying to figure out how to interpret that using the knowledge that I had at that time. And I played it as a two, in kind of a sort of medium tempo two, and then it got increasingly abstracted as I was sort of fooling around with it because it's quite a modal piece. And then one day I put a Turkisher rhythm under it, and that seemed to work, and it changed the character. And then I ran it by Zev, and Zev, I don't know if you remember this, but Zev gave me an A-OK. He's like, and was I played it for you, and I asked you, is it okay? And you said, it's okay. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do. I had the same interpretation, actually.
Aha.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but wait, there's more. But then we come to Machiavetsky, and in the Machiavetsky manuscript, he does not say it's a Gassennigen. It only says what is written here in Yiddish.
Yeah.
Can somebody who's better at Yiddish, do you want to read that for us, Eleanor?
Yeah,
And then we can talk about what it says.
A Tanzka hat zum Herrn oder
Oder.
Tzadikim Gitte Jiden tanzen sie langsam vor die Hand.
Great.
Right. And it's there's something
Übersetzen?
actually not this may actually be the right one. I'm not looking up at the music, but there's something sehr langsam and it has something about heiligkeit or to the hand. This I may be looking at the wrong description. That there's one that this says the hands, but there's another one that says it's for the good tzaddikim, the good people, the good tzaddikim to get themselves into a state of prayerfulness. There's a different word. I may be looking at the wrong description.
This is not quite, but the point is that he's telling you that it's ambivalent. It can be either for listening or for dancing mainly with your upper body.
I think I may be.
And for
Which
die
is fine.
Tzadikim Gitte
Langsam.
Jiden, not for, it's not a like,
It's not for everybody.
Not
it's
for
not a
everybody, no.
community dance,
No,
right?
no,
It's,
no.
it's a,
Gitte Yid is also a tzaddik, it's not just a good person, it's a religious Jew with some
right,
charisma and respect in the community. It's a Gitte Yid.
right.
Maybe he was a mitzvah tanz.
No, not necessarily. No.
That's why I said
And
maybe.
he says zum Herren, right? Just listening. And that's the whole point. In Jewish culture, dancing didn't always mean feet. You can sit down and dance. People did that, just moving their arms, moving their hands.
And it says slowly, which also
Langsam,
gives an indication of how the tune may be played.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And so, Hannah, if you were there, I know that you know the one that I'm talking about. Is if you can find the correct description of this one, are you on an airplane?
Wow.
Oh my God, Hannah, you're amazing. Train.
Air train.
Oh, Germany, you are amazing.
Wow.
If you happen to be able to put your fingers on the tune that I'm talking about and help me identify the correct KMDMP number, that would be so awesome.
Wait, you mean it's not the 1785, or there's another tune?
I feel like there was the description that I'm looking for is different. Yeah, and Clara, can you unpin us so that we can, or can I unpin us so that we can go to gallery view? Remove spotlight. We're gonna remove the spotlight. Back in gallery view. Let's be all together. In any case, once I read this description that had been provided by Machiavetsky, like it really changed the way I was thinking about this tune. Like really, really, really profoundly. Hannah, it should be in the chat. And the tune is the one that goes ya ba 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 bum, ya ba 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 dum. And I know we played it in a play along, but I just am not able to put my fingers on which one it is in the middle of the session here. But all that to say that by having added information, like when Ilya, you're saying that you've got this new respect for how people transcribe and the information that people write down in their archival spaces.
No, I'm saying I have less respect. I'm saying well,
First you said more respect, and then you had.
I have more respect for
Yep.
people who work with archives,
Uh-huh.
and because I realize that it's not easy work, although it's fun. But I have to be organized. But I have kind of less respect for people who write down things and make mistakes, or
But
write down
it's the making mistakes. It's taking care.
making the wrong mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
totally.
And you also mentioned something about decisions,
Right.
right? They impose their own preconceptions.
Totally.
Right. And also, as an extension for this, the way we interpret this is also very important. So, it's not just like, it's not enough to just play the notes that somebody transcribed. It's kind of, you have to, as a researcher, go beyond that and go into the mind of people who transcribed it and try to hear the music with their ears, before they wrote it down, and then as much as possible.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a tension between that. What you mentioned is the bandstand chart and the archival chart, and I think we tried to raise. I hope I feel like we've been sort of successful in this, in the sense of like when we were envisioning how the Kisselhoff project would come together, and how to do these notations. We sort of asked for this care in the notations that would be conscious of the editorial decisions that we make almost unconsciously, And I don't know of those of you in the room who have transcribed tunes, and there are many of you, if that resonates with you as having been helpful or not helpful, I don't know.
Well, I would just point out that one of the things that happened, and happened in a couple of the tunes that I transcribed, is just there was a certain amount of like sort of detective-y guesswork going on, like when there'd be smudges and things like that. So there you did kind of have to make decisions, and so I think that kind of happens sometimes. I actually would point out, I have both editions of the Beregovsky, the one that what is it, 2002, and then the one that Kurt Bjorling worked on a little bit. And I remember very, very specifically, there's one tune that I liked a lot that I sort of, did a gig version of. And I noticed that when Kurt did his edition of it, he made an editorial decision about, sometimes you have like these measures of 2/4 at the end of like phrases in some tunes, and I've seen it come across in some constituting nigunim. Shaftamayim was one especially, and Kurt said no, it couldn't have been 2/4, it had to be 4/4, and I was kind of like no, throwing that right out the window. Not that Kurt's wrong, maybe he was right, I don't know, but I do think that the earlier edition. I think I felt like that was a real bold decision to make about something that we know it's not like it doesn't show up in other places. So I think that sometimes it's preconceptions can be not necessarily inaccurate, but maybe we don't have to go that far, about decisions we make when trying to understand that. So
yeah,
that's a great point, Zev, also. But that's an example of a preconception that, because Kurt's a responsible person. He's not a, he's not an amateur. But one where I would have said, I don't feel any compulsion to make that particular kind of decision if I have enough evidence from other sources that it's not something that shows up in other places. So I think that even when we make decisions, we should try to make sure that we have precedent for it someplace else, and that's a way we could make that way you could make editorial decisions. So I would say that those two things are challenges. The one, just the fact that the physical state of the piece, and then two, making sure that if you do make a decision, it's not totally out of the blue.
Totally.
is just to add to the Björling-Berezovsky discourse, because I remember some time ago I saw some email exchange with Kurt where he analyzed some of the Makanevetsky tunes that also appear in Berezovsky, and pointed out that Berezovsky eliminated some of the what seems to be quite important important parts of the notation. Like he got rid of some of the corrects, he reversed some of the corrects. Not sure. I think he was talking about the very first tune in the Berezovsky, whereas in Makanevetsky it was similar but different, and it feels like Berezovsky definitely made some editorial decisions as well. So, you know, this is to say that again, you know, my point is always that we cannot take any transcriptions as a, you know, as a Torah in its unchanged.
Totally.
We have to debate it, and we have to, you know, we have to add our own.
So you mean we
Jordan.
can take it as a Torah and discuss it?
But that as long as you keep in mind that would include the Torah.
Totally. Well, that same I found Clara, let me rephrase that. Clara found the piece that I was talking about. So Hannah, you were off the hook as you were on the train. But it is Mac 1669 is the one. And
Could you share the music maybe for both of these if you have it?
I have it. I can put a link. You got a link now that we. Oh, thank you, Hannah. You were involved in that. Thank you, Hannah, the knower of all things Makanevetsky. But here again, and Claire's going to find the link. She's going to post it up in the chat so we can all look at it. But I can, in the meantime, share screen, I suppose. Let me make sure it's. I'm going to share this one. Here too. Can everybody see it? Here too, what is in Makanevetsky, we have so much more information here. Makanevetsky manuscript, and Makanevetsky says composed by Pedutzer. We don't have that in the Berezovsky editions, any of them that I know of. And we have it in its original key. And then the third section in this version from Makanevetsky is quite different from what is in Berezovsky. They're related to each other, but they're quite different. And then here we have this beautiful text, which I dropped in the chat. Freilich spielt man vor Goethe jeden Tzadikim sehr langsam in sehr Gein in Tanzen verklärt in Heiligkeit. Which to me just gives a whole different valence to this piece, you know, and it makes me really feel like playing it in a completely different way than I had ever approached it as a Gassennigen, because I have a lot more information about context, you know.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of context that Berezovsky wouldn't want to include.
Right.
For political reasons, of course. He was getting enough criticism as it was.
Right.
So, yeah.
But it does make you wonder about these sort of changes to the music itself, you know.
In his edition in Moscow, does he attribute it to Makanevetsky as his source?
I don't know. I
have it right here.
I don't have the Björling edition in front of me.
No, I have the Russian edition.
What's the number in Berezovsky?
The Russian in Berezovsky is it might be,
or in any Berezovsky.
Anybody know where I put my Berezovsky?
Since we're asking. Okay, this is a noble thing. Berezovsky. Berezovsky in the Russian edition, it's number 70. In the golden edition, it's 70, and so I would imagine that in the Kurt edition, it would be somewhere around that number.
What number are we?
It's number 70 in the golden edition.
Number 70 in golden. It's discussing again.
So, I mean, I think all that to say that it just, a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, he cites Makonovetsky. Yeah,
Right.
Berezovsky
And
said
so if he says that the source is Machiavelsky, like, okay, fine, man, but like, why did you change it? Why did you not put on the page what was on the page?
Yeah, it's a good question.
And for us, so so the reason you see this unusual background behind me and the fact that Clara Biome is here she's in my screen. Look at that. Is that we are on the Klezmer Archive retreat this weekend. And Eleanor, Eleanor's up here, right? We're all here together. Is that we're on a team weekend workshop here, and we are very concerned about this. And in fact, our friend Max Rothman, who is also here, whose hand. Yeah, you see that hand over there? That's Max Rothman. Max is one of the people who keeps reminding us we need to know who made what change when, so that when we see a version change, when we see a comment added or a metadata genre description added, we need to know who made that choice, right? We have to find the balance of the way that we can do those things meaningfully, so that there's a meaningful way to track who's touched these things and who's made decisions, especially about these things that are, typology and genre are areas where there will be disagreement, like productive and beautiful disagreement, and we want to make a space for that. But we also want to make sure that those choices are being recorded as what they are, which are choices, So, in any case, does anybody like a Talmud page for the tune? Yes, and we yes, we're all over that. Definitely.
I guess a kind of a comment on this, and I don't mean to be contrarian, and I'm not think I'm contradicting anything, but just a good question to ask yourself: why shouldn't Berezovsky edit something that he doesn't like?
Well, I mean it depends on
he's
what
writing
is
the book.
goal.
It's
that's not science.
Yeah, but what Machiavelsky wrote down is also not science. Berezovsky can say, well, if you want to see the original, you can go to Machiavelsky and see his handwritten transcription, and I made some additions because he's I don't know, because he thought it was wrong. He thought
wrong.
He was I don't know, he thought it would be better this way. I mean, he was acting as an arranger.
Look, Ilya, you must have read the dissertation defense that his daughter published, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't remember it, but I read it.
Yeah, sure, because he was getting a lot of questions, and his opponents, were very critical of and instructive about what he should do, what he shouldn't do. He had to defend his decisions in many cases. So I mean, this was scientific work. This wasn't commercial work.
Right. That's like that. Right. Is that it'd be fair to say, right? He wasn't writing a gig book.
No,
this was
not
for
at all.
analysis for his doctorate, right?
It's his PhD.
So why? So I think that's the answer. If the answer is I have source material, I'm going to present the source material. I'm going to try to do this best I can to explain what I think I'm seeing. And honestly, in a certain way, I'm not quite sure I understand why he would want to, but that maybe leads to
what? I'm sorry.
Right? Maybe that leads to a different conclusion, which is maybe he had a second text.
Yes, it's possible Makonovetsky had written the tune more than once.
Right, another scrap of paper with something on it.
Berezovsky may have been looking at something else that we don't have access to anymore.
Yeah, by the way, that's also a very Talmudic experience, right? Sometimes you have an argument among the Rishonim, right, the medieval commentators, and it turns out that one of the Rishonim had an alternate text of the Talmud, and that's why he's got this totally different interpretation of things.
Yeah,
that happens too.
That happens too.
And we get Lieberman to straighten it all out in the 20th century.
But so let's keep this conversation going. I don't know if any of you in the room here have a tune or a song that you can think of that you know, that like that has really has an archival connection that an art, you know, either through archival, like a source from an archive and a source that has been communicated to you and facilitated to you through the hands of an archivist, you know, like that can be illuminating to our ideas about what we're sort of talking about, this idea about how you can how archives and archivists inspire creativity and reinterpretation of our music. I mean, we're sort of criticizing Bergovsky for the way that he's choices he's made. And that's one side of it. And sort of understanding methodology is extremely important. But to see how these methodologies inform our interactions with archival spaces is like a whole other area of conversation, you know. I see you came back, Francis. Do you have a comment for us?
I'm no, sorry, I'm a little shell shocked, except for this tune that you've been talking about, which I think of as Christina's tune because I learned it from you.
Oh, cool.
At Yiddish New York, I think, and so it's like Eleanor said, or any. I mean, I will always associate it with who I learned it from, and then when I find it in the written record, it's like this pleasant and lovely surprise. I started a really long time ago trying to organize my iTunes by trying to find all the tunes, the same tune done by different people. And it's just kind of remarkable. So it is cool to discover the original source. I'm also, apart from the written record, the old sound recordings, I'm in awe of the people who can make sense of those most of the time. I mean, sometimes I can't even tell half the time if it's a violin or a clarinet. And I find them very difficult to listen to. So anyway, that's another source that I think is incredibly important, but
Yes.
also kind of elusive. That was a free association there.
I may say something. Hello?
Yeah, sure. The cylinders, Eleanor just wrote in the chat that the cylinders are tough, especially the
Oh,
cylinders,
the
and
older
I
ones.
agree. I love me a good scratchy 78 recording, but man, those cylinders can be really tough. But go ahead, Zev. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me that when I was working back with Andy Statman, that although he was Dave Taras' student, he would never only want to think in terms of how Taras played. Even at the same time, he wouldn't tell Dave about this. He was listening to Beckerman's recordings, he was listening to Brandwein's recordings, and he was coming up with a synthesis that made sense for him, right? And it was an interesting bit of diplomacy because while we were with Taras, we had to do things a la Dave, you know, the way Taras would want. And when we did Taras's tunes, of course, we had to do things more or less. But even there, we made changes. And you know, Andy was always very good at synthesizing different sound, aural audio sources. Whereas at the same time, I was the guy who was looking at notated sources generally, and even from the first recording, I insisted on using. I didn't want only to do things that had been recorded. So we have a couple of pieces from the early Soviet and other written sources, and that was also an important, let's say, discussions that we had about how to interpret them. But which brings me to another point, if I may indulge, that my own archival experience was primarily with Turkish music, with Ottoman music, and I was working with Prince Kantemir's own handwritten notations in his own system, from 1700 or something. And when I was transcribing them, I learned the Islamic notation to do that. What was very instructive, I showed them to a number of master musicians in Istanbul. And again, their music, let's say, it has an oral transmission, it has some written transmission, and there's a lot of, let's say, some continuity, a lot of lack of continuity. There's an intonatia that continued, and then there were breaks in the intonatia and changes in the intonatia. And I learned that I couldn't really trust anybody 100%, And my vocal teacher, who is now the head of the state chorus, he said he would never teach anything for which he had not heard an authoritative recording or teacher. He wouldn't do anything from notation alone. Had to be an oral source. So when I confronted my teachers, who were some of the best Ottoman musicians in Istanbul, with these old notations, with my transcriptions, over the years I learned that there was a big differences between the different musicians, and that after a while I learned that my teacher, Nejdet Yashar, the great tambour player, he had an uncanny, let's say, Yerusha, an inheritance of the different phases of Ottoman Turkish music. And if he didn't understand something, he would say, "This is too archaic, I don't get it. We don't do this anymore. I don't know how to play it, and I wouldn't play it." Then another piece he would look at and say, "This is interesting. It's archaic, but I sort of understand the melodic progression. I can do something with it." And at one point, I asked him to record some of those things, and those recordings are just priceless. And what it taught me was that even within the same culture, so to speak, and even the same generation, you can have different musicians with a different kind of intuition and storage of cultural memory. It's a kind of individual talent. It's not only a question of who is his teacher, it's beyond that. Because you can have people with very much the same level of teachers, and yet some people are superficial, they look at the most immediate solution, and other musicians like Nejdet Bey would look deeply inside themselves and to hear, how could this melody resonate?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then he would show me. And it was just amazing. Okay.
You ever chime in here, Clara? I hear Clara wanting to chime in. Clara is going to chime in.
Okay.
So I'm ceding part of the half of the screen to Clara.
These are mostly just comments on my time working with Michael Elpert's collection, because I've been digitizing his field recordings. And one of the things that I find particularly unique in that collection is that it's everything he recorded. And so you get multiple versions from the same person, which is, of course, a much different archival experience than living in a 78 collection, right? And so even we're going through and writing down each rendition, trying to select our favorites or ones that are unique for a moment or whatever. And Bronya even changes, she makes choices throughout the time that he's recorded it. So I don't know what the point of my sharing this is, other than like this, it's important to also remember that archives are particularly a moment in time, and even the individual performer that's documented there is, their renditions change. And
Right.
Yeah, as they should.
Yeah.
If it's an oral tradition, sure.
Right. So.
Hi, Beth.
No, it's very important. That's very important to remember, and it's a privilege that we have this access to it, that Michael did.
Right. Well, and it helps us remember to not fetishize a particular rendition of a tune.
Oh yeah.
And we have these canonical recordings. I mean, I'm a Pavlovian imprinter of 78 recordings. Like, I tend to imprint on a particular version, whatever the one I learned, and that's like the one that my brain wants to reproduce in some way, even though I know I can't reproduce it as it was. But like that oftentimes is the CD track that's playing in my head, so sometimes we have to work to try to capture things that we know in those recordings, the spirit of the things, the intonatia. And sometimes we have to also just sort of self-consciously free ourselves from the obligation to reproduce a particular rendition in order to fuel our own sort of creative engagement with the material, and finding that balance is really hard, because like too much on one side or the other ends up being quite static. I can see you, Eleanor, wanting to say something here.
Well, that makes me think that this could be seen as a mistake by someone else, and it's a choice that you make.
Right.
It's something because it's, I don't know, you just prefer playing it that way. It falls better under your finger. I don't know. Yeah, whatever reason. So yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I want to comment on what everyone's saying.
Go for it.
But so what Zev told me reminded me of that tune that you, Christina, from the I think from Kiselgov. I don't remember exactly what it was, but you brought it to us and was like, I can't really make sense of this.
Oh, is this the Eleanor's-Niggin? We call it Eleanor's-Niggin now.
Well, great. I don't, yeah, I think that so, and you know, it reminded me of a Tishnigun that I learned from Patty Farrell. And that was sort of had this sort of Dobriden kind of movement in it, and so that's but then the tune would move into like some sort of more like dancey things, but it still had the second beat as a
A feature.
you know, yeah, right, and but more like yeah, something else. I don't remember how it goes.
But this
I have to look at it.
Eleanor's-Niggin, that's such a this one. This is so everybody. I don't have the music in front of me, but
And then some of it reminding me of like da 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 da.
Okay, I'm gonna
Da,
find
right,
this.
right, right.
Yep.
So like some sort of like classical lullaby, you know, or
Right, there's like a
it
little
would still,
whisper
like-
of Mozart in there somewhere.
right, but it would still kind of work together with that second beat. But it was very different characters throughout the song, throughout the tune. It was so
Totally.
interesting. And
Totally. I'm finding this for
I
everybody.
mean, I don't know what's right, and I don't know what's wrong. Like in terms of how to play this, like as Zev said, like from the manuscript, who knows what it
That, I get a link.
really would sound like, but these seem to be pretty fun and make some sort of sense musically. And it was fun because it would like have this progression.
I don't know if I may
So this
add.
one, yeah. So this tune,
Yeah, I would love
so
to.
I could. I'm gonna get to you, Zev, in just a second,
Sure,
but
sure,
I'm gonna
sure.
put a little imprint of this melody in everybody's brains, and Clara's looking up the link. But just so you can hear as it goes, this starts out ya ba ba ya ba 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 ya da 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 ya ba ba ya ba ba ya bye bye ya ba 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 ba. Yeah, ba ba ba, yeah, ba ba ba, yeah, ba ba ba, and then it repeats from there. And so that part sounds very Dobriden-ish. It has this sort of you can very easily find a way to interpret it in a Jewish way. It goes on to become increasingly, to my mind, Scandinavian in what it does. So it's a really kooky tune, and so I leave that with you. I presented it at Klez Cummington this year as a tune where we are going to just be bringing our knowledge to finding a way to interpret the tune. But okay, Zev.
That's great. Well, I just want to remind us that in the oldest Klezmer recordings, we have what's called ovoid rhythms. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this term.
Sure.
Ovoid. My
from
friend
you.
Jean During invented it. Right?
From studying with you somewhat.
Yeah, well, I inherited from During. And it's a useful term in many musical culture. He doesn't know from Klezmer music. He works in Baluchistan. But he knows that this principle exists in many different kinds of music, also in ours. And it's very striking that you have it full steam ahead in the earliest recordings. Then in Belf, it appears somewhat. It's a little bit under control, but it's still there. And when you get to the larger ensembles, no, it's flattened out completely. So as far as I've ever heard in the larger ensembles. So I remember when I first played Belf for Izali Zemsovsky's wife, Alma Kunenbayeva, she was very struck by the ovoid quality of the rhythm. Now, there's no way for us to write this down.
Right, Zev, but like I'm just here to tell you, I appreciate what you are talking about. We all appreciate this, but I'm telling you, this tune may have ovoid qualities to it, but the kookiness and the weirdness and the interestingness of this tune goes beyond only a rhythmic interpretation.
Oh yeah.
So what we've done, if you're looking up this tune, Hannah, what did you just say?
Oh.
I just said that it's 1659 and not 1559.
Oh, 1659.
I thought I re-uploaded it, but doesn't seem to be the case.
Okay.
Just to not confuse people if they're searching for it.
Is it 59 or 69? Wait, what?
It's
It's 16. 1/6 is the
But-
first.
which is
Yeah.
the title of the file, but it's
The
wrong.
file name is
Oh.
right, but the
But it's the right tune.
page thing. Yeah, the tune is
Okay.
the right tune.
I trust you. Great tune, and I would love to hear more about like the way that the choices that you make around it. Eleanor sent a phone recording of herself playing this on violin. This very beautiful, like very Yiddish inflected thing, and I know we played it in your backyard. But for my ensemble Bivolitsa, we've really leaned into this a hybrid interpretation and that leans into this sort of pan-Western European, slightly Scandinavian interpretive vibe. And that we've done this, you know, if you know me as kind of a traditionalist, but we've made an intentional choice to be like sort of freeform in the way that we interpret this tune. Just because
Why not?
it would feel hard for us to shoehorn it into a very strictly Yiddish intonatsia, and with the timing and the rhythm and the harmony, and we could shoehorn it that way, but the tune, to me, to my feeling, it seems to ask for something different, and so we're trying to sort of explore what that feels like as an ensemble. And this is new ground for me. I mean, I tend, as you know, I'm a traditionalist in a lot of ways of interpreting things. But I think in Kisselhoff repertoire, we have things that are very clearly easy to put into our Yiddish klezmer interpretation. And then there are a lot of tunes that are asking for something different, or asking, the melodies themselves and the context in which we find them are not, they are much more ambiguous.
It's funny. It doesn't feel anything like a Tishnigan anywhere. To me. And I also think that it feels like a solo presentation thing, maybe. So maybe not a Doberdin either. If I were to put my Hasidic hat on for a second, I would say the closest thing I can think of is that this would be a music of a court. But if not that, and I don't have any musicological reason to assume that, but something that would be more of a presentation piece, like I'm going to play a beautiful rhapsodic solo. It does not, I gotta say, it does not feel, there's not 1 inch of this. I don't want to be.
And it can't really, I don't think it can really be a dance. I don't think it can.
No.
Yeah, I agree
Doesn't
with
feel
you.
like a dance.
It's not a
totally agree.
Tishnigan, it's not a Hasidic waltz, it's not a Jewish waltz. It's to me, it's like,
It's not a
But-
waltz. It's
No, it's
definitely
not a
not a
waltz.
waltz. It
Right.
doesn't work as a waltz. And,
but I
and-
mean, well, no, Eleanor, when I say a waltz, I mean a Jewish waltz, like a Niggin waltz, like a liturgical waltz.
right, I get it, but still,
Yeah, it's not any of that.
it doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
And it says von alte klezmerische Noten.
yeah. I
So-
think this is some violinist played this for a Hasidic Rebbe or some Reicher Yid at maybe. That's what it feels like to me. It's
And
not.
Hannah has written in the comments here,
Yes,
it's
I
a
see.
heft with a lot of Niggin-like Hasidic tunes.
It feels like court music to me.
Why not?
Would
Art-
it possible it's not Jewish at all,
Yeah,
and it's just an interpretation of some popular classical or some other folk music?
For me, it doesn't feel like that, personally. This particular tune, there are other tunes for which I think that is true. I feel like, I mean, contextually from the heft, and I'm kind of leaning into Jordan's interpretation. The thing that we've done in Bivolitsa is we have decided to leave beats out now and again. So, ba 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 ya da da ya da 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 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, ya ba dum ba ya ba ba ya da da dum. And that is, we get a little bit from Scandinavian music. It's also just kind of natural, and then we do that more also in the other parts.
or alternately, I would say, what's a fermata with you?
What's the matter for you? What's the matter for me? I don't know. What's the matter for you? Yeah, exactly. So, I wanted to illustrate in this workshop that this is this wonderful opportunity for us to really bring this 40 years of knowledge from the Klezmer revival into our spaces, and to really be conscious of the way that we work with this material, and that yes, everybody gets to do what they want, and we're here to sort of empower and enable that, but there are also ways to like really try to understand the motivation, where it comes from, what it means, how can we reach back towards to figure out how the person who wrote this down might have performed it. For me, that's a really interesting and
I love
question.
this.
Even if I might choose to perform it in different ways, I do also kind of want to understand that. Yeah, what were you going to say, Eleanor?
This last part. Die, die, da, da, die, da, da, die, da, da, die, da, da, die, ya, da, 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 da. I don't know. It's just great. And that's kind of a void because like I don't think you can play that very like
Of course not.
there is this like tempo sort of
Yeah.
it flows.
Yeah. Something is shifting. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I don't know, it's just I find this delightful, but it's quirky.
Totally. I'm kind of obsessed with this tune. I love this tune. But what were you going to say, Ilya?
You asked a question an hour ago, and I think I have an answer.
Callbacks. Let's do it.
This reminded me of something that I've been, working on, and a little bit of a different angle at archives, but also okay. So something that I'm planning to teach at Yiddish New York, I think, or at least parts of it. So and this is something that I found out through Zev, actually, and it's so there's a melody with a few different sources, as I like to explore. That's I don't know, that is mostly, and coming to your question about like the tunes that kind of resonate with me the most in the archives are the tunes usually that I find in other sources and that I can compare. So it was very interesting for me, when the KMDMP's project started, not just to find completely new tunes, but find, oh, this is a version of this, but it's, in a different, but this and this is different. So there's this melody. It's the middle section of Naftali Brandwine's recording of Turkischer Yele Vayuva.
Yeah.
And I found a recording of it, and Zev and I were talking, and Zev said that it's in a manuscript, this melody, and it's in a manuscript by it's called The European Jewish Wedding by Herman Shapiro.
Yeah.
Who was, if I remember correctly, from Belarus.
Yeah.
Here it is, if you want to see. And so the very has a very funny introduction, which you're welcome to read later on. This was published in 1904, something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's 1904.
Yeah, very, very early on. So basically, let me see, what is the second tune in this? I have questions about the first tune as well, but the second tune in this collection, number 2, is called Zmiros. So
oh wow, and it really just starts out right with that.
How do you say Zmiros? What is Zmiros?
Zmiros.
Like a religious.
It's part of the wedding ritual.
Right.
Some places they use the term. Beragovsky doesn't use it, but it was used for part of the wedding ritual. Zmiros.
Right. So basically, there's Zmiros, and here, I can share with you a video. It is an almost exact transcription of this this particular section of Tigran Chukhanjan's operetta. I'm not sure what this is technically, called Leble Biji Hor Hor Achach, which means the chickpea vendor.
I totally like you might be surprised that I know about that from a Facebook thread I documented for the Music Librarians Association thing. I remember it well, the chickpea seller. I do.
Right. So it's appeared in a few because basically, from what I remember, the operetta. I'm not sure what this is. This piece was composed by Chuhanjan and he was a Turkish composer of Armenian descent, or I'm not sure what he would call himself. He was Turkish Armenian in 1887 or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And it became a very popular parts, like the melodies from this. And we don't know. It is assumed that he might have borrowed some folk melodies for this. But in any case, like those the melodies from there became very popular, and it was kind of also, he was the first one to attempt a fusion of sort of Western classical tradition and Turkish the non-Western classical tradition. So it became a big hit, and it was played around Europe and the Mediterranean, and it was a few Greek versions. So it's one of the recordings I found was there's a Greek, there's a few instrumental versions from Greece, from Lesbos. But it's interesting that actually it's so far only the Shapiro's transcription actually features, it's pretty much exactly the same as in this video.
Great. So I want to hold sharing the video for one moment.
Yeah.
We've got 10 minutes left in our official session.
Yeah.
I totally want to listen to this recording. I also want to listen to and watch, give everybody the opportunity to watch the video of you that you promised, that you mentioned to us at the beginning of the session. But before we get there, but I want to also give people the opportunity to head out having sort of reached the conclusion of our thing. But I want to talk about a thing that Clara and I have cooked up as a way to think about oral transmission in real time. I had this large dreams of doing a mapping project where we would map the spread of the Kisselhoff project and stuff like this. And it failed. It crashed on the reefs of an impenetrable and impossible Google form that was a survey that was like horrible. But what we decided to do is to maybe just track one tune and to do an experiment with Hannes Skoczna, which is by far and away the most popular and most widely distributed tune in the Kisselhoff corpus. And so the idea would be to just have a very simple Google form where you could write your name, who you learned the tune from, and on what context, and where you live, and where it was that you were when you did this, on Zoom or however. And then for you to take your phone and record yourself playing the tune. And that we would be able to, in the way that you or your local ensemble plays it right now, today, because I was at a gig on Friday, and I threw this up on the chart. I threw this up on the bandstand, and the clarinet player and I already had different interpretations of this tune, like wildly different interpretations, including the note choice on the B part. So we thought it would be really fun to use this as a way to sort of just see what's happening with this one tune as a result of our, the way that this corpus is sort of finding its way into Klezmer land. I don't know. Thoughts, comments, ideas? What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. And I would like to see what happens with the verdict on whether or not that E is flatted.
I mean, verdict? You want a final judgment, or you just want to do a popularity contest?
Popularity contest. I don't think a final verdict is possible.
Yeah. Well,
it would be if the preservation librarian in Vernadsky Library, which
could unfold that little fold of the piece of paper,
but that requires real skills. Like, you can't just unfold it,
flip it apart, right?
You need I don't know, some kind of very careful process to do that. So maybe one day we'll know. I think the answer is right there in this fold.
Yes, the answer to that question is hidden under the fold.
That is so interesting. Tweezers.
Totally. Well, but the answer for our community is now in our community because we've introduced this ambiguity. The ambiguity was there in the material that we're sharing, and eventually, like Schrodinger's cat, we'll open the fold, and then the waveforms will collapse into one unified space. But until that moment, we're going to also choose our interpretations with the E natural or with the E flat.
And when we find out the answer, if we ever do, the version that's different than the one in the manuscript will have spread enough that it becomes legit too.
Totally. That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah, does anybody have, yeah, exactly. So, be on the lookout for that soon. Also, I'm here to report that the Klezmer Archive team has been having this team meeting, and we're really thinking about, and this is for you, Hannah, in particular, but for everybody in general, we've been talking about ways to streamline the data ingestion, the data processing, particularly for the text things. And just, Hannah, you should know that we have thoughts, we have ideas, and we're working on it. And we're going to be coming to something that you and Reuven can work on together in a way that is not onerous in the way that what you have right now is. So just be aware of that. And I'm very much thinking about ways that people like Ilya and other folks in our community will be able to add data that shows the connections between tunes. Oh, this part reminds me of this part. This is a version of that thing. And it's going to take us a little while to get that stuff sort of set up and running, but accepting input in that way and then making it visible in a very kludgy, very super kludgy, not, non-user friendly way, at least for those who are able to look at those datas, is something that we're sort of conscious of because we know that that's really important information for us who are sort of swimming around in this data. And I think the ability to capture that as we're touching these manuscripts is really important, because there's so much material that if you're like in a play along session, you're like, oh yeah, that reminds me of, we need a place to be able to just put a Post-it note somewhere in our data store. So just like amongst the many things that we're talking about this weekend, like that is something that has definitely been on the tip of our brains. Be sure quite specific about, can you say that using words?
Yeah, but I have to go soon. My parting words will be that it can be very dangerous to say this reminds me of if you don't be very specific about what are we talking about, because sometimes it just can mean certain cliches or cadences or certain, I've seen unfortunate examples of things which are obvious throughout the repertoire. And depending on somebody's expertise, this could be a very valuable observation, or it could be a dead end leading nowhere.
That is entirely true, which is why we want to always be making sure to track who said it, whose observation this is, and to the extent that there's an ability to be specific about what it is that the reminding of in what way, like that's actually sort of detailed, but but I think just sort of gathering the breadcrumbs, even these little breadcrumbs that can be followed up later. They help to add information to our tune records that help us evaluate things as we go.
Oh yeah, in the long run, yeah. If it's done well, it's a big help.
Right. Sure. So with that, I want to say I'm going to formally sort of stop the tape recording and end the session, but I want to say first thank you to Eleanor Bazinski for spending the afternoon with us, tuning in from Milford, Connecticut.
Thank you.
And to Ilya for sharing your knowledge, and we're going to hear some more from you. when we play these recordings, and for Zev for chiming in as you do so wonderfully, and for Eric and Hannah and Beth and Jordan and Francis and Clara and Rosa, who are all here sharing this time with us. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and say we'll see you next time. And thanks for being here.